What is going on, everybody? Back again here, rolling out Meet the Author, your host, Malik Brown. And today, I am with another amazing author today. I am with Miss Sussie Anie. She is the author of the book To Fill a Yellow House. Miss Sussie, how are you doing today?
Hi, yeah, really good to be joining you. I can't wait to chat a bit about the book as well.
Definitely. I'm glad that you are here speaking with us about this amazing book that you have. And you know, for people that don't know about this book, people that want to get into this book, what is a synopsis? What is something that you can tell us about this book? What is To Fill a Yellow House?
So yeah, there's so many ways that I could describe it because it's quite a multi-layered novel, lots of themes moving around. But at its heart, it's about friendship, about an unlikely friendship between a British Ghanaian boy who's going through school and going through a lot of pressures at home as well, and a shopkeeper who's a bit older and is grieving the loss of his wife. So it's about the circumstances in which they meet and their attempts to save the shop that the shopkeeper works in, which is in a state of decline, like much of the high street around it.
What inspired you to create this book? What kind of inspired you to create this storyline that you have?
So I think it was the time that I wrote it that like generated the inspiration for me. So I'd taken a year out of work, partly because I was just like overwhelmed with all the stress of work and commuting across the city as well. So I just took a year out and I wanted to spend more time writing. I've always been into writing and always made up stories, but it's like the older you get, the harder it is to make time to keep expressing that creative part of your life, unless you're lucky enough to do a job that allows room for it. So I felt like if I just take a year out and focus on writing, either it will go really well and maybe I'll be able to spend more time writing, or I'll have a great time anyway writing and then I'll come back and work again. So yeah, I wrote this novel after that year out. So I felt just like really energized and really refreshed and inspired. And I also moved out of London to study that degree. So I moved to a really small city called Norwich, and it was just completely different to London. So when I moved back to London, it was just like, oh, I want to write about everything in London. I want to write about life in the city. I want to write about the transport system. I want to write about the internet. I want to write about the ways in which so many different lives from people from different backgrounds can become entangled and can cross over because of the way that cities work. And I wrote this novel so quickly just because I was really refreshed and really inspired after that year out. So yeah, I think it was very much the timing that generated the inspiration for this story.
What is it about writing? You know, it's like you say, you wanted to take that year out to just focus on it. You know, if you loved it, you loved it. If you didn't, you can come back. But
yeah,
what was it about writing that just was like, you know, I really want to do this. Like, I really want to see if I can do this.
I think it's about the possibilities. And the novel was kind of about this as well. Like when you're in a creative space, there aren't limits to what you can imagine or what you can do. And especially more recently, this was before the pandemic that I wrote this novel, but it felt that there were a lot of constraints in the real world and there's a lot of limitations kind of closing in. So having that space to imagine and to remember that the world is so much bigger than the moment, whether it's through historical fiction or through fantasy or science fiction, like I used to be really into, having that space of storytelling was like to be alive in a much fuller way. And it's also that you have access to worlds that are far beyond the present, which is kind of like across genres. You can travel space, you can be in the Victorian era, you can do all kinds of things just from sitting down reading a book. And when you can write that as well, you can then generate and share worlds with other people. So I've always like been into creating space, I guess, through storytelling and opening worlds. I think it's something as well because I grew up in like a really religious community. So I read the Bible really young and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's like dragons and fiery monsters. And there are also these stories about queens and about loyalty and about family love and sacrifice. It was just these really high stakes themes that I was immersed in growing up. So I think I've always been looking for those story arcs and that satisfaction of really complex plot resolving in a way that kind of haunts you or stays with you for a long time.
What are some of your favorite books? What are some of the books that you definitely recommend to people that are looking to, you know, get a good book and read, you know, get into some healthy reading? What are some books that you really enjoy that really maybe change your trajectory of writing or change, you know, how you think about writing, things like that?
Yeah, I'm a really messy reader, so I read everything for real. I'll read, I don't know, like classic sci-fi. I'll read poetry, like more modern, kind of contemporary, lighter fiction. But books that have stayed with me and that I keep in my bookcase and that I will treasure until I die. Color Purple, I always talk about the Color Purple Festival because that's a sacred book to me. I read it when I was a teenager. And I think where I grew up as well, there weren't many dark-skinned Black women where I was. So, and in books, we didn't have many depictions of dark-skinned Black women either. So when I read The Color Purple, I was just like, oh my gosh. And it's a really complex story that's not just about tragedy or about loss or grief. It's about healing, it feels like. And it's also what Alice Walker's doing with language in the story as well. I'm really into stories that use lyricism in the style of writing or that are able to convey another story just from the texture of the language, if that makes sense, and from the rhythm of the language. And I think Color Purple is just like top-notch example of that. I would probably also recommend The Famished Road by Ben Okri, which is like magical realism. So that's a bit more abstract, but also feels very playful. I read this when I was in school as well. I think it's the books that I read during my formative years are probably the ones that stayed with me the most because I was so young and it was my first time encountering stories of that kind. So Famished Road was like the first magical realism novel I've read. And another one that's really transporting. It's set in kind of Nigeria, but it creates space for like a multi-dimensional reality, and it really expands what's possible because there are spirits and there are people who might not quite be real. There are, just forms blending and blurring the lines of what's like metaphysically possible and what's real. So that's a novel that's always going to stay with me. More recent one, probably be Ghana Must Go by Taya Selassie. Again, the first book I read that had kind of like the diaspora, the West African kind of diaspora families represented and was exploring themes that felt quite familiar to me and was exploring trauma across generations, but also had space for loss of hope and optimism. That book had me in tears on the tube, on the underground. It was so embarrassing. I was like, I'm going to finish this book. I was going to meet a friend or something, and I was reading it in public. And it's just, I don't cry much in public, but that book destroyed me and will always stay with me. It's another one that does beautiful things with language as well. So I always recommend it.
So To Fill a Yellow House, why did you title it To Fill a Yellow House? What was that about? Why wasn't it To Fill a Blue House, To Fill a Purple House? Why was it To Fill a Yellow House?
That's a good question. I don't have that question before. I think there are quite a few like references to the color yellow in the book, just like with the door colors and with the house having yellow features in it. But the title, yellow has connotations that kind of mix. So yellow can be seen as a sign of like weakness, but it's also very bright and optimistic, and it feels quite summery. Part of the book, the book begins in summer, and it begins in Kwesi. He's the main character in a way, one of the main characters. Begins in Kwesi's childhood, which is in the summertime. So it begins with him moving into this new house in a new part of London. It's a lot of the story is about him trying to establish a sense of home and belonging, and part of that is literally about the house and the people who come into it and go and move out of it and how that affects him. But it's also about the mood that he's in as a child when he arrives, and how that changes over the course of the novel. And yellow, for me, yellow also feels quite uncertain as a color. I don't know if you get this, but it's like a mood of slight edginess and not quite there. But it depends on how you look at it. So if you pick up a book in summertime and you're in a really good mood, you might take the title to be about summer. I'm really curious about what readers will take from it, because I know like the way I saw it, but everyone who takes the book in their hands will see it in a different way. But it's that mix of emotions that I feel the book kind of explores or kind of hovers over, and draws together. And then it's the idea of filling, which I wanted to explore, the idea what it takes for a house to be full. So Kwesi, the novel is kind of told in alternating chapters. Part of it is the shopkeeper who's called Rupert, and the other part is the boy who's called Kwesi. And they're both in a way trying to fill their lives or trying to create a sense of belonging or new identity after like some disruptions that have happened. So it's that sense of emptiness that is referenced with the word fill, but it's also about Rupert's shop, which is a collection of all these kind of cast-offs and hand-me-downs or things that people have thrown out because, I don't know, they're clearing out their moving house or they just wanted to give stuff to charity. So it's almost like the shop itself is a house that's gathering parts. But I also just like the poetry of the phrase "to fill your house" when I was writing it. Struggle with sticking to a single title. I often go through many when I'm drafting a novel. So this one that stuck.
Is that how authors, is that a thing for authors, just going through different titles, they just don't find one that really hits and it's like,
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. You definitely do know. You do know when you found the one that hits, I think. But when I start, it takes a while before I know what the heart of the story is. So I think to have a title from the get-go and stick with it is rare because often the story will change as I'm writing. There are some writers who maybe you've spoken to who are really organized and will start out like with a clear plan of what the novel is, plot it out probably chapter by chapter and write it. I wish I could write like that, but I can't. So the title will change and lots of things will probably change.
I want to ask you, you talked about your favorite books and you talked about Color Purple. You talked about it's healing. You talked about the other book, it had you crying. What do you want this book to do for readers?
I think the idea of opening worlds is really important to me. Like, and again, about possibilities. I hope that for readers, they will feel a sense of expansiveness while they're exploring, even in the early chapters with Chrissy while he's young, that perspective of being a child and being in awe of the most mundane things and simple things in the neighborhood and trying to capture it all on the page through art. I hope that sense of the world being big and beautiful and new and full of possibility stays with them. And I hope that kind of lifts spirits as well. The book has like some harder themes and some sadder moments as well. But I hope that the complexity will speak to readers, because I hope that the characters feel real and honest. That was really important to me when I was writing it, to write characters that kind of have space to be real and to be honest. And I think that's a really sacred thing that fiction can do. So yeah, the sense of expansiveness and possibilities is what I hope. And as well, like from the plot and the events that are quite dramatic on some levels, I hope that maybe just be a fun read as well. But yeah, it's the sense of expansiveness and possibilities is the core of it, I hope.
Wrapping it up, I want to ask you, where's the best setting to read this book? Is it a yellow house? Is it in the house? Is it in London, where you are right now? I mean, everybody can't get to London, but where's the perfect setting to read to fill a yellow house?
I think it feels, I mean, maybe I'm biased, I love cafes. So I would say in a cafe or somewhere cozy, where you can kind of sit down for a long time and just immerse yourself in the world, but where you're also kind of in a public space too. So you can step back from the book and people watch, have a conversation, have a chat, get a drink. Yeah, I think outdoors, but in an indoor space is great, if that makes sense. So yeah, in a public, but indoor cozy space.
Definitely love that. Well, you guys know where to read to fill a yellow house now to get the best experience. Go to a cafe, go somewhere, get some coffee, do something nice. Sussie, thank you for coming on, speaking with us about you being an author, to fill a yellow house, all in between. We appreciate you here rolling out. Before you go, let the people know where they can find to fill a yellow house, and where they can find you if you have social media and things of that nature.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter mostly. I've got a website as well, and I'm doing some events coming up soon, and the book is out this week. So it's out, I'm gonna forget this, oh my God. No, it's out on the 1st of November. So basically tomorrow. It's already out in the UK, which is why I'm a little bit, but you can also get it on Amazon as well, Kindle if you want it there. But bookshops, support your local bookshops if you can.
Well, you guys heard it here first. Thank you again, Sussie, for coming on, speak with us about the fill a yellow house. We appreciate you here rolling out, and we're supporting you through everything you do. And thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Always, always. Thank you everybody for checking this out. This is Rolling Out. Meet the author, Malik Brown.